Wow, what a finish to that game. Penn State wins against Minnesota 26 to 25, and it took not one, not two, but three different fourth down conversions, gutsy calls by Penn State and James Franklin to preserve their playoff hopes.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of this live post-game show. Penn State beats Minnesota 26 to 25. Looking for your questions, comments, reactions, as we are going to have an open-ended conversation because that was quite the game. That was quite the game. Minnesota gave Penn State a fight, but I'm going to begin with the way that Penn State finished the game and all of those gutsy calls. You fake a punt on your side of the football field with your third string tight end. Not Tyler Warren, because I think Minnesota would have been suspicious, right? Not Tyler Warren, not Khalil Dinkins. Luke Reynolds, the true freshman, steps up big and doesn't get just a measly 5 or 10 yards. Like, yes, a first down is a first down, but flips the field. Minnesota is definitely backs against the wall type of situation. And Penn State just continues. The tush push, which is still legal in college football. Yes, both in college and the NFL, but it's still legal. And we were all thinking the same thing. When is this going to happen? And it happened. And then on the final one that actually seals the game for Penn State, Minnesota thinks they have everybody covered. They think they have everything covered. And Andy Kotelnicki says, no, you don't. The rollout, Nicholas Singleton in the flat. I'm sure there was a receiver over there that was off the screen that was probably there. And then Drew Allar was going to tuck in and run for a few yards. That was taken away. And then Tyler Warren is able to get wide open. And Drew Allar hits him perfectly on the run to seal the deal. That is... I don't want to overreact to this game, but I am. I am going to overreact to this game because Penn State played like there was something to be had. They played the fact that they are all in on this season, that it is playoff or bust, and they acted that way, and that's sometimes what you have to do. You have to roll the dice because Penn State's defense was the issue in this game. Aside from all of the mistakes, and don't get me wrong, I will point out the offensive mistakes in this game. But offensively, Penn State still put up 26 points despite all of the miscues. The issue was the fact that Minnesota had this game within a score, within one point, right? The defense against a barely top 100 offense for Minnesota, and I know special teams certainly change things. Minnesota was able to manufacture 9 points on special teams. Blocked PAT, blocked punt, gives them a short field. So it's not entirely on the defense, but I certainly was never expecting Minnesota to score over 20 points. I could have never imagined that. And the defense was not able to bail out the offense. No, the offense had to bail out the defense this time around. And like I said, early miscues, interesting decisions, not going for it on fourth and short because you know that Penn State can get it done. So why are they punting it? Why are they doing that? And it all worked out in the end. I mean, hindsight's 2020. Those play calls, had they been made earlier, the tush push on the 4th and inches or the 4th and 1 earlier in the game as opposed to late in the game, right? Do we have to kind of weigh that? Where would you rather have that play called? In the first quarter or in the fourth quarter? And it's not that you can't run it again, but Minnesota's expecting it and is going to plan for it better. But I think the fact that Penn State never said, okay, we're going to give Minnesota back. We're going to give them the football back. Penn State kept the ball, kept moving with the football, and closed the game out on their terms. The Nittany Lions won the game on their terms, which is different from any of these past teams. Any of these teams, 2016, 2017, teams that, had it right, 2019. ended up losing that game, playing from behind. You notice that? Compare the 2019 road game at Minnesota versus the 2024 game at Minnesota, where Penn State is trailing Minnesota and has to try to win the game on Minnesota's terms. Penn State won the game on its terms. And that was really it's not only the decision making to say, okay, we're going to green light this fake punt. You have to draw it up. You have to execute it. Justin Lustig, the special teams coordinator, deserves every bit of credit that James Franklin does for green lighting the play, for that to happen. And then Luke Reynolds, I'm getting ahead of myself because Tyler Warren does so much. Luke Reynolds, a freshman, a true freshman, has to make that read through the lane. Blocking has to be perfect. And Tyler Duzansky has to make a perfect snap, the long snapper. All of that goes hand in hand. And if you give Minnesota the football back, they were running it well enough to close out the game. And then you're playing right into their strength. So Penn State knew exactly what it was doing when Penn State went for it, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the third time, right, Minnesota's going to get the football back with 20 seconds, so the odds are surely against them. But really that fake punt especially. Minnesota was able to have success on the ground. Tackling was not perfect. Defensive depth was limited. Tyrese Mills, Alonzo Ford, those are key players. Those are not just, they're backups, they cycle in. No, those are key role players down the stretch here, especially Alonzo Ford at defensive line. That first front 4 against Minnesota's offensive line, that was one of the battles that decided this game. And Penn State knew that defensively they were playing at a disadvantage. So they kept the game in the offense's hands. And it's so different from what 2023 was, where that defense could take over a game and the offense was the liability. I am not saying that this year's Penn State defense is a liability. It is just interesting how the offense has bailed out the defense, not once, not twice, I think 3 or 4 times in this case this season, when you think about it. Really, when you think about it. This game against Minnesota, the game against USC, obviously, you had to score 33 points. The defense didn't score 33 points. Penn State's offense did. And that's really the story of this season, just how much of a difference Andy Kotelnicki has been this season. But it took everything. Minnesota row the boat. It was truly all hands on deck for Penn State to win this game. And that's what matters, because I don't think Penn State gets into the college football playoff with a loss. You would need a lot of other things to happen, but I like knowing the fact, and I'm sure Penn State does too, that the Nittany Lions control their own destiny. The Nittany Lions finishing hypothetically now 11-1. This was the biggest obstacle remaining, a road matchup with Minnesota off of a bye week. I am not afraid to share that my prediction was way off. I didn't think Minnesota would score. I was not even convinced they'd get to double digits. But they made this a game. But once again, Penn State's second half adjustments prove to be difference makers. Whatever Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen scheme up at halftime, it is gospel at this point, because Penn State continues to do it on both sides of the football. We're not really scoring. Andy Kotelnicki turns it on from 6 points at half against USC to 33 points for the game. And Tom Allen's defense against Minnesota, granted, it wasn't the best performance. It was not the best performance, but it was enough to get a victory. Penn State is playing complementary football. That is what matters. They're playing complementary football. The offense helps out the defense helps out the offense, vice versa. I think the offense is carrying the defense a little more as of late, but sometimes your offense is just better on a given day. Sometimes your defense is just better, but it really does help. It really helps when you have a coordinator like Andy Kotelnicki and players like Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, Tyler Warren, superstar players that can help carry this team. Andy Kotelnicki has a lot to work with, and I bet he loves every part of the offense. Penn State wins 26-25 over Minnesota. I am looking for your comments, your questions, reactions to this game, as Penn State is now 10-1 overall in the season, 7-1 in conference, still has an outside shot to the Big Ten championship game. So we have plenty of things to discuss. We'll start going through the box score as we wait for some of your reactions and comments, but we'll talk about this game more on the other side of this break. And today's live show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more than or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So your lineups will stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. And Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup is not perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. Do you think Saquon Barkley is going to have more than or less than 95 rushing yards? Do you think Jalen Hurts is going to have more than or less than 1.5 passing touchdowns? You can cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's check in on the comments. I mean, fans should just feel relieved after this game with Penn State, because a 1-point win, a 3-point win, a 10-point win, a 100-point win. I mean, yes, a 100-point win I think would go a long way, right? But Penn State won the game. I can't say the same for Ole Miss. Ole Miss is out, and I was reliably told. I want to say this on the show because I put this out on X. Ole Miss, I was reliably told that Ole Miss was a national championship contender after they beat Penn State in the Peach Bowl, even though Penn State was down 12 of its starters for that game. I was told that Ole Miss was a national title contender. A 3-loss team is not getting in to the college football playoff. Let's look at the comments, shall we? Should have used Prabula more. Is that sarcasm? Is that serious? So my thoughts on Beau Prabula. I like Beau Prabula. I really wish he would work well in the offense more. However, when Drew Allar and the offense are into rhythm, it really feels like it's a speed bump when Beau Prabula comes into the game and they try something. Maybe start a drive with him or start a series. Same thing. Start a drive or a series with him instead and see if you can get that going rather than it just smack in the middle of a drive. It really feels like it's an obstacle more than it is a luxury. I actually don't mind him as a gadget trick player, almost as a wide receiver. Can Beau Prabula catch? Can he catch? I like that idea when he was in the slot and came in motion and there was all this pre-snap movement. It confused me. Nothing really happened, I don't think, on this play. But Beau Prabula, just the fact of, okay, we have to account for him because he might get the football on this play. Can he catch the football? You don't have to use him in this wildcat style. Can he be? He's a quick, shifty type of player. I don't know why they can't use him more outside of, oh, well, he's a running quarterback. He's a running player. He's just a versatile player. And then if you get it to him on a backwards pass, he could still throw the football on that hypothetical screenplay, if you will. I think they need to be more creative with Beau Prabula and bring him earlier in the game rather than it feels almost random at points in time. Clutch against an unranked team. Pathetic, brother. A win's a win. Minnesota had 2 weeks to prepare for that game. Don't get me wrong. I think Penn State should be, at least on paper, they're dozens times better than Minnesota. Minnesota gave it everything. Minnesota gave Penn State everything that they could handle. Again, a blocked PAT, a blocked punt, right? I feel like 9 points were manufactured for Minnesota. This game really should have been, relatively speaking, 27 to maybe 14 in favor of Penn State. That's a lot of what ifs, but I don't think previous Penn State teams win this game. Okay, so that's the difference. Penn State won. We're talking about a Penn State win, not a 1-point loss, not an upset loss. We're talking about a close win. So at the end of the day, which would everybody have? So it was gritty, not pretty. Don't get me wrong. That's the exact word for word definition of gritty, not pretty. But Penn State in the past does not win at USC, does not win at what was one of the other tough games, because it wasn't West Virginia, right? They handled West Virginia. Wisconsin, Drew Allar going out against Wisconsin. They don't win that game. That's Iowa 2.0. That's Iowa circa 2.0 when Sean Clifford goes down. And then a game like this, where Minnesota is physical and just keeps returning punch after punch after punch. They're getting some lucky breaks. It wasn't a perfect game, and Penn State still won. That's the thing. You have to a good, great team. I can't make the argument right now that Penn State is this elite team. I mean, they're dominating the teams that they should, where they have matchup favorability. Washington, West Virginia, Purdue. Okay, but when Washington and West Virginia, they're not good, but they're at least respectable. They're decent teams at the end of the day. So Penn State is going to dominate those kinds of teams, and obviously Purdue, Bowling Green, or not Bowling Green, what am I saying? Kent State, because that was a close call against Bowling Green. But Penn State is finding ways to win. They are finding ways to win, preserve victories, and that is my definition of a playoff team. You have to be able to win in multiple ways. You can't just follow your game script that works for you. Penn State is winning in ways where, whether it's throwing for 400 yards or it's running 50 to 60 times a game, it's where, and it's really been on the offense. The offense has been able to manufacture ways to come from behind, to play a complete and total game, because the defense has been slacking in some of these games more often than not than the offense. The offense has bailed out the defense more often than not this season, which is crazy to think because the defense did everything a season ago. The offense was such a liability. But for Penn State, they are winning games in different ways that they couldn't before. A fake punt? Going for it multiple times on fourth down? 2023's offense would have never been able to do that. Are you kidding me? And Penn State is still in a position where they control their own destiny. I really wanted them to punch it in at the end so I don't have to hear from the talking heads about how Penn State does not belong in the playoffs all week. I think that's a good point, is that now there's a case to be made. And it's not, here's the thing. I want to, you know, I want to say that, you know, what I say about Penn State matters. ESPN or Fox or NBC or anybody, right, is going to say different things about Penn State. At the end of the day, it does not matter. And I don't mean to dismiss my show or any of the other networks that put out great content. What matters is what the committee thinks of this Penn State team. That's my point. The committee looks at Penn State as the fourth best team in the country because they find ways to win. They are beating teams that are Power 4, that are in conference. Who did Tennessee play today? UTEP. Oh, that tells us a lot about Tennessee. No, it doesn't. Georgia, and Georgia to an extent, okay, they played a Massachusetts team here late in the season, but their schedule is still very tough. Penn State and Georgia have the thing in common in the fact that they are going to play 10 Power 4 teams. Not everybody else can say that. Not everybody else can say they won those 9 to 10 Power 4 games. Penn State's strength of schedule is legitimate, and the committee values that. That game against West Virginia, Georgia's the only one that scheduled that type of game where they went out of conference against a Power 4 team, and they beat a talented Clemson team. And I know West Virginia is not Clemson, but you are still opening yourself up to upset potential by going on the road against another major conference type of team and winning convincingly. They won. And they're playing, it's not, Penn State could have scheduled Wyoming Tech, right? For that opening game. They didn't. They scheduled West Virginia. And the committee values that. And the committee values the fact that they are winning on the road at Minnesota, on the road at Wisconsin, on the road at West Virginia, on the road against USC. And they're doing it in a variety of ways, whether that's, like I said, throwing the football tons and tons of times like they did against USC. Drew Allar had to throw the ball 50 plus times for almost 400 yards. You're running fake punts. You're going for it on multiple fourth down conversions. How do you manufacture a win? And Penn State's doing it against, and like I said, they could have had a tune-up game instead of West Virginia, and they didn't. They decided to schedule a tougher type of game. Great game and some gutsy calls by Franklin. I'm so glad to come away with the win. Would you rather have a close win or a loss at the end of the day? If you're Penn State, I'm sure they would. I'm sure they will take this win. Gritty, not pretty, but if they were on the other end and it was a 1-point loss, how are we talking about this game? How are we talking about this game? Pathetic on third down and another slow start. There are plenty things to be upset about as far as how this game went, and things to be concerned about based on this game. Special teams made up with it because Luke Reynolds made the play of his career early on as a freshman, but special teams had a blocked punt and a blocked PAT. That's a 9-point swing for Minnesota because they get favorable field position and they get the 2 points on the PAT. And the game is in this situation because special teams screwed up earlier in the game, right? There's plenty of things. Tackling is a major issue. And yes, they had all these fourth down conversions because they didn't convert on third. I have the box score up. I don't have it in front of me, so let's look at this. On third downs, Penn State was 1 of 11. 1 of 11. They were 3 or 4 on fourth down, but they were 1 of 11 on third. That is not good. Would like to see Luke Reynolds more involved in the offense, more targets. He's a better option than most of their wide receivers. Luke Reynolds has come a long way. I mean, there's a reason that they gave him the green light and they said, you know what, we cannot redshirt you. You are too good. Penn State still has Tyler Warren and Khalil Dinkins. I mean, Tyler Warren is now the best tight end in Penn State history. If you had your reservations about that before, he broke the record for most receiving yards by a Penn State tight end. So the conversation is null and void here. Tyler Warren is the best tight end in Penn State history. So he earns every bit of usage in the offense that he has. I mean, this was a game where Minnesota did everything in their power to take him away, and he still had 8 receptions for 102 yards. And honestly, if he would have gone into the end zone for a touchdown, but you take the 1-point win over giving Minnesota the football back. Okay, you don't need to score a touchdown there. So they still found ways to get Tyler Warren the football, and he did a lot. 41 yards after the catch. That's what's most impressive to me. Most decent tight ends are guys that are used in the offense, because Tyler Warren's in the elite conversation. But more often than not, tight ends are possession receivers. They can't do a lot with the football. It is, I don't want to say it's rare because that's how you make it to the NFL. You have to be an all-around tight end. You have to be able to block. You have to be able to get yards after the catch. So he's not just a possession receiver. I catch the football after 8 yards and I don't go anywhere. He had 41 yards after the catch. Tyler Warren is able to take the football and make moves and get downfield, whether it's a long catch or a short catch. Tyler Warren is that's the way that he's versatile. Is he's not just, okay, he has good hands. No, he is an electric playmaker. He is a tight end that doubles as a wide receiver. And once again, the wide receivers were relatively quiet, but they got enough. They got enough from them today. Amari Evans should have had 2 touchdowns. There was pressure on Drew Allar, so that overthrow or that inaccurate throw, it is unacceptable to an extent, but there was pressure there on that play. Trey Wallace gave you 4 catches for 46 yards. I mean, Penn State only threw it to 5 different players: Tyler Warren, Nicholas Singleton, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans. So I'm glad that Wallace and Evans gave them 100 yards together. Really, that's 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. That is a good stat line. That is a good stat line for what it's worth. It's not one of those games where the wide receivers don't show up at all. And Penn State needed that. That was just enough to get them past Minnesota. So we already talked. So it was a long road to get, okay, so should they use Luke Reynolds more in the offense? Absolutely. But he's not going to be the first immediate option. You have Tyler Warren, you have Nicholas Singleton, you have Katron Allen, and then you have Trey Wallace, Amari Evans. Julian Fleming is clearly not healthy. He was questionable. He is not healthy. I think Luke Reynolds and Tysier Denmark are almost in the same conversation of they're just not at the forefront of the offensive game plan. They can handle the responsibilities, but you're going to go to Tyler Warren first. You're going to go to Trey Wallace first, and then most likely a Khalil Dankins and an Amari Evans. And yes, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, all of those guys are weapons within the offense. There's a pecking order, and Luke Reynolds and Tysier Denmark are frankly 7th and 8th. I'd rather the football go to Warren, Singleton, Allen, yes, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, even a Liam Clifford before they get to Luke Reynolds and Tysier Denmark as well. I think Tysier Denmark has a bright future at Penn State. Offensive line is a massive problem. I'm eager to see how the analytics grade them out because it was not a good performance. And to be honest, Penn State's offensive line has been middle of the road all season. Now, what doesn't help is the fact that Anthony Donko went out with an injury on play 2. And he's probably out for the season. That's all speculation. That's no medical reports. He was carted to the locker room. It's not a good situation for Donko. And Nolan Rucci, thank goodness they got him in the transfer portal, but that's still the Anthony Donko has gotten so much better from game 1 to now game 11. Anthony Donko was Penn State's best overall offensive lineman. I would say Vanga Ioane second overall. So Drew Shelton, Sal Wormley, Nick Dawkins have been okay collectively. Individually and collectively, they've all been okay. The good players have been Vanga Ioane and Anthony Donko. I would say, what can you do to get Cooper Cousins a little more involved? What can you do to make sure that Nolan Rucci he's a decent, Nolan Rucci's biggest strength is his run blocking. But you can run 60 times a game, but you can't just run the football because, our right tackle's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. What can you do in practice to make sure that Nolan Rucci can at least become a viable, respectable pass protector more often than not? Because that's where he struggles. I don't know if it's footwork. I don't know if it's speed. But Nolan Rucci certainly, and you can scheme Singleton and Allen to help block. You can't do that with Tyler Warren because then that takes him out of the play for those extra 2-3 seconds. So they have to be careful here. Appreciate your comments. We're going to talk about more of this, right? There's so much. There's so much we can get to about Penn State and Minnesota. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. Let's take another quick time out here and pay some bills as we hear from another one of our sponsors. And today's episode is also brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking, and here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that to break down this byproduct. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you will feel your best tomorrow. Now here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Easiest part, right? Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnCollege at checkout. And ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guaranteed. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head over to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Okay, let's keep the live post-game show going. Back to the comments section. Lost a little bit of my spot. Here we are. Singleton ran tough. The offensive line needs to step up. So Singleton looked the best that I've seen him all season. So at the beginning of the season, looked really good, looked like himself, and then sustained those bumps and bruises. But he looks back to his normal self, right? The footage from USC in comparison to the way that he played tonight, and that's part of the reason, or this afternoon into the evening, part of the reason why Katron Allen got little to no run. I don't know what's going on there. 7 carries, 10 yards. This was Kaytron Allen's worst game of the season. But thank goodness that Singleton, it helps to have a 1A, 1B. And we all agree that Singleton is the better running back. We know that. He's taken a step forward, and Kaytron Allen's still really good. It's not to say that, oh, Singleton's good and Kaytron Allen's bad. But it is nice to have multiple options, because when Singleton's not 100%, look at Kaytron Allen picked up the slack. Kaytron Allen became the workhorse, the bell cow, right? Quentin Martin unavailable. Okay, you get a little bit of help from Corey Smith, but not a lot since he's only a true freshman. And then you get the dynamic duo back at full strength. Hopefully we see more out of Kaytron Allen. That's really surprising, because I don't have anything as far as, is he hurt? Is he in the doghouse or something like that? Is he in trouble? Because he was a no-show in the first half. And I wonder what that was about, because I thought that he got a couple of carries, or at least I thought I saw him in a couple offensive series. But, I mean, Penn State was throwing the football around quite a bit. I do want to talk about Drew Allar, so I'll get to some more comments here. But I really do want to talk about Drew Allar and the way that he's performed this season, kind of to bring it all together on this live show. Need Penn State to start quicker and finish earlier. My heart cannot handle this Saturday after Saturday. And who do you think Penn State beats first in the college football playoff? Okay. No, I agree. It's ironic, because Penn State was only down by 3 at half to Minnesota, but I had more confidence Penn State being down by 14 to USC than I thought Penn State would beat Minnesota. I didn't think they would beat them only by 1 point here. I thought it would be 7-10, another comfortable, kind of similar to Wisconsin, if you will. But I had more confidence Penn State being down 2 touchdowns to USC than I did 3 points to Minnesota, if I'm being honest. So yeah, they certainly gave everybody a scare today. And Penn State. So Penn State didn't start slow, but they definitely let Minnesota in it. Right? Minnesota had the fast start, because Penn State still put up 16 points, and they should have put up 17. It was a block PAT. But 17 points against a top 20 Minnesota defense in the first half. I would argue that they did not have a slow start. Maybe overall you could make that argument, but in my opinion, they did not start slow. They didn't prevent Minnesota from not starting fast. That's the point. Minnesota started fast, so did Penn State. Right? 17 points in the first half against that Minnesota defense was what I was anticipating. I thought they would get 17 in the first half, and they almost did. Right? Hey, Zach, I'm positive Singleton suffered a bad concussion. I think that explains the hard running, but the soft hitting by him today confirmed it when the players congratulated him gently with head smacks. That's some real detective work. Is that deductive reasoning? That's some real good deduction there to figure out he was dealing with a lower body injury, because the way he was running was slower. I can't tell you one way or another about the fact of, hey, how can we assess, is it a concussion, because the way that he was running gingerly against USC. So has he been dealing with a concussion recently or long term? I don't know, but I thought it was a lower body injury, that the way that he was running in the middle of the season. That's just the eye test. That's my eye test. Yes, the defense started slow. Okay. No, that's fair, right? But it wasn't to a point of 6 point USC 20, Penn State 6. That's a slow start across the board. So let's get to Drew Allar. And if you have any more comments, we'll check back in on the comments section too, right? This is your conversation just as much as it is mine. I do want to talk about Drew Allar, because Drew Allar missed a couple of throws here and there, but I thought this is another good game on the resume, another great game. Is it elite per se? Probably not. But when your quarterback does this, 21 of 28, 244 yards, a touchdown pass, a rushing touchdown, and then multiple fourth down conversions down the stretch in clutch time. So Drew Allar was clutch. Drew Allar played mistake-free football against a Minnesota defense. All they do is force mistakes. Drew Allar did not throw an interception in this game against a team that has 16 interceptions on the season. That is almost 2 interceptions per game. Minnesota did a very nice job at the beginning of taking Tyler Warren away, and then he got more involved in the offense, and Allar did not panic. I think it's kind of a running debate as far as how Drew Allar's emotion is perceived, because he was fired up after whatever that no timeout. Apparently, this isn't a timeout, guys. Guys and gals, this him making the timeout signal and yelling timeout is not a timeout on that Tyler Warren pooch punt or whatever that was. Drew Allar, I like the emotion. If you want my opinion about Drew Allar's emotion, some people are taking that as immature. I like it. He's fired up. He's challenging his teammates. James Franklin. Now, you don't want it to be egregious because it's not. It's not to a point where, yes, it's different. It's unusual because we haven't seen that from Drew. But Drew, in a lot of ways, has grown up because these types of moments, these types of games broke him down a season ago. And they were 10-2 because of it. Drew Allar had no answer. And then, now granted, Ohio State and Michigan were elite teams. Those were the only, like, the biggest games that he had mistakes in. But it wasn't pretty against Illinois, and they won that by, double digits, right? There were games or Rutgers, and I know he was injured in that game a season ago. My point being is that Drew Allar responds. Drew Allar push comes to shove, and then Drew Allar is pushing back, literally and metaphorically. I like the way that Drew Allar has grown up this season. There's that swagger to him. He's doing everything and then some. He's not just a pocket passer. He's not just a system quarterback. He's able to ad-lib at times. He knows where to go with the football. He protects the football. Aside from 3 interceptions at USC and 1 interception against Bowling Green, and the 1 interception which was a miracle play by the Ohio State cornerback, Drew Allar protects the football above all else. 99 out of 100 college football teams would take Drew Allar as their starting quarterback. There's 134 FBS teams. I'm pretty sure I could probably name Colorado, and maybe there are probably some SEC teams that would stick with their quarterback, right? Lane Kiffin's going to say that he likes Jackson Dart, and George is going to say that they like Carson Beck and things like that, right? The coach is going to stand by their quarterback. But in terms of the play, it's not even about Drew. It's yes, about Drew Allar, but it is about Drew Allar's performances. I am saying that college football coaches would take this kind of performance against a Minnesota team where all they do is force turnovers. Drew Allar did not turn the football over and didn't even put it in hard. I think there was one play where the linebacker tipped it and it was a near interception. That was the only remotely costly play that Drew Allar had. Yes, did he miss some throws to Trey Wallace on the sideline, Amari Evans in the end zone? Yes, but it did not cost Penn State. It did not ruin the game for Penn State. And that is my point, is that Drew Allar is doing things to keep Penn State in these games. And college teams across the country would take that every single time. So 21 of 28, 244, 2 touchdowns he's responsible for, a passing touchdown and the rushing touchdown. A quarterback rating, a passing rating of 160, and a completion percentage of 75%. Coaches will take that all day long. Drew Allar has come so far as a quarterback. He does not let bad moments, he does not let one bad play turn into 2 or 3 or 4. And that was the case a season ago. Drew Allar is only 20 years old, and he has grown up. I mean, he's playing years beyond of what he is in terms of maturity as a 22-year-old quarterback. I'm very impressed with Drew. If you want to critique some small things here and there and why he's not the number 1 overall pick or something like that, that's fine. That's understandable. But that's the NFL's job. Drew Allar is doing things well to get Penn State in winnable situations. That's his job. It's to win games for Penn State, and he is doing that and more. Go back to the comments. The defense looks a lot better if KJ does not go down at the beginning of the season. It needs to be pointed out the fact that, KJ Winston is one of Penn State. Abdul Carter, and then KJ Winston. And it's a 1A, 1B. KJ Winston was a first-round pick. I hope he's okay. We'll see what happens with KJ Winston's future. Does he come back, try to boost his draft stock, right? What are the scouts maybe saying to him? Is the injury going to bother NFL franchises? Is he okay with being selected in the 2nd or 3rd round? Does he have enough tape to convince football scouts that he is worth taking in the 1st or 2nd round? Right? We'll see. There is NIL, so I'm not ruling out, KJ Winston's going off to the NFL. It looks that way. But if he comes back, I think that benefits everybody. And yes, Winston has that kind of impact. Best tackler. Why Penn State's struggling tackling overall, KJ Winston was by and far the best tackler on this team. Drew has definitely matured this year. Absolutely. Oh, he's grown up so much. Drew Allar has done an exceptional job in his personal development. We knew that Drew was a good football player, but what about himself? Confidence, security, and I don't see anything that lingers from the 2023 season. Allar has been clutch all year against Ohio State. And to an extent, I don't know that that's all Drew Allar's fault against Ohio State. Was that not one of his better performances? Absolutely. But again, miracle interception by the Ohio State cornerback in the end zone. What if Trey Wallace holds on to the football? Trey Wallace had his hands on the football. It went through his hands and into the one arm, into the elbow of the Ohio State cornerback, and then he taps his toes. Are we really going to say that, okay, Drew Allar had a terrible game because of that one play? I mean, if that's your assessment, I can kind of understand, because that changed the outcome of the game. But Drew Allar, it's not like he had 3 or 4 interceptions. How did Indiana do today against Ohio State? I don't even have other college football scores up in front of me. I didn't answer that question. I'll go back to the one comment. Who does Penn State play? Because I want to pull up ESPN and see. We'll look around college football, because this scoreboard is right. Boise State struggling with Wyoming. Alabama struggling with Oklahoma. Auburn is blowing out Texas A&M at the moment. It looks like it was 21-0, and Texas A&M just got on the board late in the second quarter. Okay, Indiana. Ohio State won 38-15. Curtis Rourke was 8 of 18, Indiana's quarterback, 68 yards. He had no interceptions, though. He had no interceptions. So clearly that Indiana should have been in this game. No, he had a terrible performance. Drew Allar at least kept Penn State relevant in that Ohio State. I don't think anybody had a good day. Ohio State offensively didn't have a good day. They only scored 20 points. It was 20-13. Kevin, good to hear from you. Thanks for joining the live show. We are still alive, not pretty, but gosh darn it, I will take it. Absolutely. Do we want to be talking about a close win or a close loss? Wins matter at the end of the day. How do you win the national title game? If you win by 1 point, you won the national title game. You win a home college football playoff game for Penn State. They win by 1. I think that's all they care about. A lot of teams would love to be in Penn State's position. Yes, they would. Ole Miss has 3 losses now. They are done. I cannot understand the argument of trying to put a 3-loss team, especially because it's not like, okay, Ole Miss lost to Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, right? Okay, at some point that's going to become realistic, especially because there's already talks about making this a 16-team playoff. There's going to be that argument of, well, they lost to 3 top 10 teams. Then maybe there is that case and you don't rank them highly, right? That's the 11th or 12th seed in this case. But Ole Miss lost to Florida today. Ole Miss lost to a Florida team with a true freshman quarterback. The coach, discussions about the coach being fired and if they should even continue with Billy Napier. Now they have 3 losses. They are finished. And I was told that was a national championship contender type of team. Ole Miss would love to be in Penn State's situation right now. It is not going to be a rematch against Ole Miss like a lot of people thought. One way or another, a home football playoff game for Penn State, regardless of the opponent, is going to benefit Penn State. I think the only team that Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame's going to end up hosting. Penn State might even play Indiana. We'll see what Miami does in the ACC, right? I'm not sure of Miami. I'm not sure of some of these other teams. Boise State is getting a run for its money against Wyoming. There's no certainty in college football anymore, which is so good because I think for the past decade, it's been so top heavy where a pseudo NFL team, Alabama, and then recently Georgia, right? Nick Saban basically built NFL teams for 5 to 8 years. And then Georgia came and disrupted that by building other. There is a power shift, and it's diluted, and that's a good thing. Oregon is not a clear-cut championship contender. Neither is Ohio State. Neither is Penn State. Neither is Georgia, Alabama. All these teams have some flaws, which is great for college football. The power dynamic was, all right, is it going to be Alabama or is it going to be Georgia this season? And maybe Ohio State or Clemson can upset somebody. And then, we have LSU on a little bit of a Cinderella run here, right? You don't have that this year. I cannot tell you. I picked Ohio State at the beginning of the season to win it. I think Ohio State is that good, so I don't look at that loss to Ohio State by Penn State and say, that Penn State's clearly not playoff material. If Penn State gets the right matchups, they have just as good of a chance as anybody else of making the championship game. And I mean that. I do mean that. I think that they can go on a run. They lost by 7 to Ohio State because they couldn't punch it within the 5-yard line, not once but twice. The opportunity to win the game was there. It's not like Penn State lost like Indiana did 38-15, where Indiana is not an elite team. I think they're a playoff team. They should be the 10 or 11 seed, whatever have you. It's splitting hairs. But Penn State is right there. Penn State should have won that game against Ohio State. I know there's no moral victories in sports. But my point being is that they did not lose by 2-3 touchdowns. Penn State was right there and could have and should have won that game. Georgia or Alabama in the first round, or maybe a Tennessee. I like that game against Tennessee because I don't think Tennessee is that good offensively. They're a very good defensive team. Think of them as a quality playoff contending type of team comparable to Minnesota. I think that's that's what Minnesota could be if they were elite, if you will, or just at least a playoff type of team. Did Dom DeLuca play more snaps than usual at linebacker, or did it just feel that way because of his pick? So I don't have snap counts in front of me. I could try to find that real quick if everybody wants to bear with me. We'll wrap up the show here soon. Live show. Appreciate everyone being a part of the conversation, right? This is what we're all trying to talk about and stuff. Dom DeLuca. Dom DeLuca had a great game. That interception, that paid dividends for Penn State. Let's see. Because Pro Football Focus will have snap counts and everything. So I'm trying to see if they have the game in. It will take them about 24 hours to put the overall stats in. So I'm trying to see if maybe they're ahead of the curve tonight. So bear with me. Penn State, Minnesota. Okay, so the data's pending. Let's see. Dom DeLuca, you got a question? Nope, they don't have the game grades in yet. So we will have to be patient. But Dom DeLuca certainly made his presence felt, right? I think we can all agree on that. It definitely will not be Ole Miss. No, it won't. You can take that one to the bank. I think Penn State beats Miami by 2 scores if we happen to play them. And I say that whether that game's at Beaver State, I agree with that statement, whether that's at Beaver Stadium or on a neutral site. I do not think Penn State and Miami are close. I think that Penn State should be at least a touchdown favorite, maybe even a bit more at Beaver Stadium. But if Miami wins the ACC, they get the bye. They would get the bye. So if Penn State's that, Miami's looking to be maybe the 3 seed, hypothetically. That's what a lot of the playoff projections look at. That's the way they look. And Penn State's the 6 seed. Penn State plays a Tennessee in the first round, 6 versus 11, and then beats Tennessee, hypothetically, beats Miami as that 3 seed, upset, if you will, right? Even though I think Penn State would be the favorite, and win by 7 to 10 points against that. Miami's great offensively. Miami is really good offensively. So that's a lot of points. That is going to be a lot of points if Penn State and Miami happen to meet. Zach, do you think Indiana will fall out of the top 10 in the next poll? They shouldn't. They shouldn't, because they've won every game on their schedule to this point. I would not drop them that far, but it also depends on what everybody else does. So, did Miami even play today? I don't even know what Miami did today. Okay, so they beat Wake Forest. So let's see here. So Indiana's 5th currently before the updated playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. Notre Dame would go above them. Alabama's in a rock fight right now against Oklahoma, so I am not going to speculate what they're doing. Let's assume that they beat a bad Oklahoma team. So Indiana would drop to 7. Miami would jump them. That was a good win against Wake Forest. They won 42-14. Ole Miss lost, so Ole Miss is out. They're going to drop below all of those teams. all the way down to SMU. So they'd be 14th or 15th, maybe. So they wouldn't be below them. Georgia, Georgia had a convincing win against Massachusetts, everybody. See, okay. So the committee's actually been consistent with the way they, forgive me for adjusting in the chair. The committee's been consistent where if you don't play a good team late in the season, they actually penalize those SEC teams that try to do that. They schedule Tennessee Tech. Tennessee played against UTEP today, right? And the committee will actually knock you down a rank. So I would not be surprised if Georgia does not move, because we did not learn anything about Georgia beating up on Massachusetts. They played Massachusetts. And frankly, Massachusetts scored way more points than they should have. So the committee is going to look at that. And honestly, I would not be surprised if Indiana falls to, so this is a long-winded answer to say no, they don't fall outside of the top 10. I think Indiana is going to be maybe 9th, and Georgia does not move from 10, and it is going to be absolute chaos. The committee is going, because I am going off of what the committee has done in the past. So if they are consistent, despite it being a 12-team playoff, that's how it's going to go. Georgia's not going to move because they beat Massachusetts. And Indiana lost to the number 2 team in the country on the road. So I could see Indiana falling to 8 or 9, depending on how some of these other games go, and Georgia does not move from 10, because what did they prove? Oh, you proved that you can beat Massachusetts at home. Cool. That will help your resume, right? Kevin adds, I believe Dom played a lot of snaps today. Literally, our defense did not have their best day, but Zane Durant, Kobe King, Kobe with a K, actually, but I get your point here. Kobe King and Rojas played pretty solid. We are. The defense, so depth was limited, right? Cornerback, Elliott Washington didn't play, for example. Tyrese Mills is that safety linebacker hybrid that's been coming in and actually playing a pretty crucial role down the stretch here. Banged up. Alonzo Ford was in street clothes, was not in his uniform on the sideline. He was out. And then you factor in things like Hakeem Beamon left the team, right? So Dennis Sutton's not 100%. Penn State's defense certainly did not have all of its depth that it needed for today, and they survived and won. Speaking of Rojas, his tackling looked better today than it has all year, in my opinion anyway. That's something positive, because Penn State's tackling collectively did not look good. And so I'm glad that Tony Rojas improved his tackling, but it seemed like everybody else. And that's players not being able to wrap up through the hit, and also bad angles. I feel like one of Penn State's biggest problems is that they don't take the right angle to the football player. So a broken tackle is one thing, but a missed tackle is also the fact that you could have made the play if you took a better angle to the opposing player. Catron struggled today. Minnesota exposed a Penn State tendency with the run ratios of Nick and Catron. It's a good observation. I don't know what was going on with Catron today. I'm sure we'll all get to the bottom of it here, look at the game and stuff, but he certainly this was the worst game of the season here. I think this is a good place to wrap it all up. Penn State won 26-25, and other teams did not. Other teams that were on the verge of being in the playoff, not being right, was a thin line between playoff or not, lost today. And I think that's what Penn State can be happy with, is that they won and did not lose, because I honestly think that would have jeopardized their season. I don't know that a 2-loss Penn State team would have gotten into the playoff, especially because these are winnable games. Penn State was the favorite. Penn State should have won today, and they did. And then they will play Maryland. And 11-1 in a home college football playoff game sounds really nice right about now, when other teams are going to be at home when the playoff literally expanded. So it helps. Penn State doesn't win these kinds of games in the past. They won today. I saw so much from this team that in the past they would lose these kinds of games. And this Penn State team, this version, won the game, and that's what matters. Those are playoff type of teams that can win when the cards, the deck is stacked against them. Gutsy calls, playing through the injuries. Minnesota manufactured almost 10 points on special teams, and Penn State still came away with a victory. Can't be said. Other teams from Penn State's history and other teams would not have been able to survive this upset scare from Minnesota. This Penn State team did. I appreciate everybody's involvement in this conversation. Thank you so much for contributing your thoughts, your questions, your reactions to Penn State's win over Minnesota. Penn State is 10-1 overall, 7-1 in conference, with still a chance at the Big Ten Conference Championship if Ohio State does in fact lose to Michigan next week. We're going to have more coverage throughout the week, reacting to Penn State, Minnesota, having some more takeaways, previewing what's to come with Maryland, and if everything continues to go well, up college football playoff berth. My name is Zach Seyko. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around not only Penn State football, but men's basketball, wrestling, and so much more. Everything Penn State is here on Locked On Nittany Lions.